We are 4 years into the Nintendo Switch's life, and I thought it would be a good time to reflect on the four worst things about the Nintendo Switch. These are the four biggest problems for Nintendo Switch owners, most of which did not exist with previous Nintendo consoles that we now just kind of have to deal with, and it sucks. Of course, we are going to start things off with the Nintendo Switch online service. That is really expensive for getting absolutely nothing. Now, in the past, you got free Nintendo Switch or Nintendo Online service, and with Nintendo Switch, when they said they were going to start charging money, I think a lot of people had hope that things would be better, that we would have a competent online Smash system, for example. And yeah, that just did not happen. The online service is still pretty bad across most online games. You're not really getting a lot of benefits that you would expect, and that compared to the other platforms of Xbox Live Gold and PlayStation Plus, even though those are more expensive services, you are still just left with 30-plus-year-old games, basic online functionality, and not much more. And this is also coming at a time where Nintendo is increasingly expecting players to need to use online to play their games, which is kind of a bummer, frankly. Next is Joycon Drift. Joycon Drift was a problem pretty much from the get-go with Nintendo, and things have not gotten much better over the years. The thing with Drift is it seems like it should have been fixed by now, and especially when the Nintendo Switch Lite was announced, everyone was expecting that there would be a fix in those Joy-Cons. One, because you can't attach them, so if you do have a problem, you actually have to send the unit in. But two, because it's a new console. You would think that they would have done some reworking, and nope, you still have drift issues with the Nintendo Switch Lite. I think what's most disappointing about controller drift in the year 2021 is that Nintendo really did not have an issue with drift on any of their first-party controllers ever. They know how to make a joystick. They were the first ones to make a joystick, and just a little disappointing that we are putting up with drift still, and that we can't buy a fresh set of Joy-Cons knowing we won't have drift later down in the future, when I think this is really going to become a huge problem. Next is Nintendo 64 support. So here's something that is interesting. I mean, this goes along with the lack of a virtual console. It's all kind of tied in, but even back during the Wii era, back in 2006 with your Nintendo Wii, you could download and play Nintendo 64 titles. You couldn't do GameCube titles, but you could just put a GameCube disc in and you'd be off to the races. The Nintendo Wii had an insanely big library for Nintendo consoles, as well as other consoles. But with the Wii U, we still also had Nintendo 64, we lost GameCube support, and now at the Switch, we seem to have lost both GameCube and Nintendo 64 support, as well as a lot of virtual console games that we had previously had access to. Now with the Nintendo Switch, we basically have access to two systems. We have the NES and the Super Nintendo, where we have seemingly lost support for the Nintendo 64 and for the Nintendo GameCube, unless you were able to buy Mario 3D All-Stars for $60 to get one N64 game and one GameCube game. Yeah, this is not a good look. N64 games are becoming increasingly hard to find and increasingly hard to play as a very hard to emulate system, and we know Nintendo has the capabilities of emulating the games on N64 as well as GameCube. It is extremely upsetting and disappointing to see really wasted potential on the Nintendo Switch. And the last thing that I want to talk about is the Switch tax. This is something that was called out early in the Switch's life cycle, but I think it is still just as relevant today. Games that come out on the Nintendo Switch for one reason or another just cost more, typically on a multi-platform situation. Could it be the cost of the cartridges? I don't know. I think in some cases that's definitely the case. Could it be just because they can? I'm sure that's also part of it, but even Nintendo themselves have participated in the Switch tax by selling games at a more expensive price during their Nintendo Switch ports. I'm looking at Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, a game that launched at $50 on the Wii U and is being upsold to $60 on the Nintendo Switch. I mean, that's just a little silly, as well as other examples that Nintendo has done during their porting process, the great ports that have come out. It is just insane that things, for whatever reason, are just more expensive on the Nintendo Switch, just because, despite the fact that there doesn't really seem to be any significant development hurdles on the console. And those are the 4 things that are super annoying that we still have to deal with on the Nintendo Switch, that we've had to deal with since day one. 4 problems over 4 years. That was all from me, guys, and I will catch you next time.